what is the risk of psychosis for people who consume cannabis? And what are the risk factors or things that seem to be indicating?
So a common discussion today about cannabis in the scientific research is the role and the place between, or the relationship between cannabis and psychosis. And it remains an issue of debate that science isn't completely agreed on yet. And that's an important part to think about when we think about science as it evolves. As new research comes out, we're able to reevaluate what we know about something with that new information, and then continue to move that forward in future studies so that we can hopefully come to an answer on this relationship. The one thing to know is that there's nothing out there conclusive that says yes or no at this point. There's information out there that suggests that heavy cannabis use is associated with increased risk of psychosis. And that could be for a couple reasons, and this is the important part to remember, is that it could be that somebody has a liability for psychosis. So they have the individual experiences and biological markers and these other pieces that put them at risk for psychosis. And their cannabis use just sets them over the edge so that it onsets at an earlier time point than maybe it would have without the cannabis. And so that's one thing that could be happening. So you have this shared liability. And I think that's one of the dominant pieces in the field. But there's another concern that's going on, is that the potency of cannabis, even though it was stable for a very, very long time, there's very conclusive evidence that the THC content has shot through the roof in the last decade or so. And so it is nearing this threshold that THC can hit in cannabis, which is about a third, about something over about 35% or so, where that's the highest content it can reach. It can't go any higher than that. And so there is some concern that this very high potency cannabis is playing a role. But we haven't really seen very conclusive evidence to say that is what's occurring either. So the important thing to remember is that I wouldn't disregard this relationship as one more fear tactic that exists to discourage people from using cannabis. But I wouldn't also say that it's not a problem at all. It could be something that's causing psychosis for some to onset sooner, or at a time when it wouldn't have otherwise. Or it could be that it's just completely unrelated. These two things are occurring at the same time in our society. I think science still has to figure this out. But we need to continue to read the literature and understand it as best we can, and think about our own self and our own risks and what we feel comfortable with doing.